sweet is never quite as sweet without the sour. You're an infinite being. You're an eternal being. You're just a badass, brave enough soul that you have chosen to put yourself into this separation, dualistic, environment, and you wanted to experience the contrast, right?
This is Synchronicity.
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 Welcome to episode 89 of Synchronicity. My guest this week is Brandon Beachum, and Brandon runs a wonderful podcast called Positive Head, which is now on MindPod Network. That's how wonderful it is. That's how much I enjoyed it. Positive Head is a daily podcast. He's doing one of these every day. Who does that? Brandon does that. And you'll hear one of the most upbeat and positive guys, but also lots of, like with any truly optimistic person, he's been through some shit too. This isn't like some glossy persona that he just whips out. Like, if you're really going to be talking about this stuff, you got to go through some shitty times too. Speaking of shitty times, I want to truthfully and sincerely thank everyone who reached out last week and was like, hey, I know what you're going through. Keep it up. You're doing great. I believe in you. The new patrons. Why am I saying that word so weird? The new patrons on Patreon, donators, people who emailed me, social media people. Truthfully, really awesome. I really appreciate it. I mentioned last week, as kind of my financial and professional situation transforms, or hopefully transforms into something else soon. One of the things that's been happening is, the downloads for Synchronicity have been going up and up and up exponentially. Same thing with MindPod Network, and it's cool to see. And I know we're close, and I know this stuff is going to work out in ways that I can't possibly imagine, but it's also nice to hear that from other people who it's resonating with. That's fucking cool. That's I don't think I could stop if I wanted to with this podcast thing at this point, but really when I hear the feedback from you guys, that's fucking awesome. So thank you for everyone doing that. So update, I'm definitely doing better, as you can probably hear in my voice. Not totally out of whatever funk I was in, but there's a lot of positive things happening. I think this is you heard kind of Brandon say at the beginning here in the little teaser, you need the sour in order to experience the sweet, at least in a dualistic universe, right? We're not going to go into unity consciousness right now, but that is kind of a key principle. And, if we were baseline level anything for all the time, that would get pretty boring. Maybe one of the reasons we choose to incarnate, who knows? But my point is that if you're going through anything like this, have gone through it, will go through it, as I mentioned, just know that you have people around you always, whether you know it or not, even if you think you don't. Because one of the weird things when you're getting down, you're depressed, is you feel very lonely and you feel like no one cares and no one is there and no one's going to help you. And that's just very rarely true. Even if you don't have family or friends at this point, if you're listening to this podcast, hit me up. I'm always happy to talk. So I just want you to know that you're never really as alone as you possibly think you are, especially when you're upset. Things are getting better. And really, the most important thing is I want you guys to know how much I appreciate the support. That I was overwhelmed. I will say, like, I could be like, I was so surprised. I wasn't. I know the types of people who listen to this show. I know kind of where you guys are coming from, and I didn't fully expect the amount and the sincerity of what was going on from everyone, but man, it was awesome to see. So with that said, thank you for indulging me in the beginning. Got another comment today. I think this one on the MindPod site was like, the guy in the beginning talks way too long. This is my podcast. If you don't like it, skip to the guest. No one is forcing you to listen to the intro. You have to make some smarmy comment. Who does that? Brandon. Let's get to Brandon. met Brandon about a month and a half ago on the internet. Someone introduced us and really just immediately hit it off. There's a bunch of synchronicities in terms of when people in our lives were born. This whole range from like July 20th, which is my birthday, till the 28th. There's the whole range of birthdays in our families where it's like, whoa, that's weird. More importantly, I love how Brandon is authentically talking about life stuff, right? Big things every day. The stuff he talks about is always important, and he's doing it not because he's getting rich from this and not because he's getting acclaim, even though he is getting acclaim, like he definitely is. He's doing it because this is what he believes in. He's been doing this shit well before it, and I was talking about this with Michael Phillip. We're going to be releasing Michael Phillip from Third Eye Drops. Go listen to it. MindPod Network. We're releasing a double cast soon, so one's going to be on his, the second part's going to be on mine. And, you know, we were talking about the qualifying difference. Like, we're not podcasting because this is a path to making money. We're not podcasting because this is a path to fame and fortune and glory. We're doing it because these are the types of conversations that we've been having off the air long before podcasting became available as a medium, right? Before, if it was just terrestrial radio, we're not going to have the opportunity to have these conversations and broadcast them and have people care. So that quality, to me, that intention, is a hugely important thing. And that shines through with Brandon. You'll hear it really clearly. You'll hear from his voice in this episode. Go check out his podcast. Just a hell of a dude. So I'm thrilled to have him be a part of MindPod Network. I'm thrilled for him to be a guest on the show. I was recently a guest on his show. Lots of people from his show have hit me up since, being like, hey, I love Synchronicity. So that speaks volumes to kind of where we're both coming from this and kind of what we have to offer together. Super excited to continue to get to know Brandon and just kind of see what happens. Before we get to the episode, again, a reminder, if you want to get the music that you hear on this show, right? Patreon. Patreon.com/synchronicity. There is a level where you get every song that you hear on this show. If that's what you want to do, if you're into it, with it. I am going to be releasing an EP in the fall, 4 tracks. Not sure what it's called yet. I'll keep you posted. I'm trying to reduce the amount of stuff that I do. We'll see if that works. But I really, again, not to dwell on it, but thank you so much to everyone who reached out and, you know, had words or support, whatever it was. That was, you know, really, it means a lot. And it was a big, it was an emotional moment for me. I'm trying not to get too emo here. How about we get to the episode? How does that sound? Without further ado, here is Brandon Beachum. Thank you, by the way, for coming on, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. It's, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm returning the favor. And you pointed out yesterday that, you know, I was hitting the top podcasts in the charts, and I totally credit that to being on your podcast because you were right there and you pushed me there. So thank you for doing that. So I wanted to.
Who knows exactly what the the Apple gods are doing, but I'm just glad that it happened.
Yeah, we were talking about this right before we started recording for people listening now. So, you are a very interesting and awesome person. I've only known you now personally for about, I don't know, a few weeks, a month, if that. But I've been incredibly impressed with everything that you've been putting out through your Positive Head podcast. And not only the interviews you're doing, but I love these kind of musings in between, whether relative to a situation in life or taking a quote from a mystic or someone who really knows what they're talking about and dissecting it. I'm curious, how did you get, like, I don't want to do too much of the origin story, but I do, because I'm very curious to find out, like, how did you get to the point where A, you were interested in all of this stuff, but B, decided to make a podcast out of it a couple of years ago, and now you're doing a daily, which is we'll talk about that later.
It's a little bit insane.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit crazy right out of the gate, right? So we got that covered. Yeah. So how did I get here? Well, first off, one of the things that I always say on my show is we teach best what we most need to learn. And excuse me. So as I started down, let's see, origin story in a nutshell. Raised very conservative Christian, like super conservative, and
oh wow.
I got around 20 years old or so, and it was always being fiercely independent. It wasn't really adding up. The math was not adding up.
What type of Christianity?
Church of Christ is the name of it. It's a non-denominational church. It's more predominant in the South. I grew up in Virginia.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it was. I ended up going to a Church of Christ school called Freed-Hardeman University, a little school in Tennessee. And then David Lipscomb, another Church of Christ school, and getting kicked out.
Why'd you get kicked out?
But,
no. Why'd you get kicked out?
I got kicked out because I was one of the bad kids. I was like smoking pot and
regular reasons.
I ultimately got busted sneaking my girlfriend out of my dorm room as I just am taking her out the side door. The dorm mother's coming in the side door because someone parked in her spot. So she came in a totally different interest. And I mean, perfect timing, meant to be. Talking about, which altered my course, which led me to going from getting kicked out of Freed-Hardeman, going to David Lipscomb. And then, of course, from there, starting to experiment with psychedelics, which really opened me up to the idea that, holy smokes. I actually met someone who had some psychic ability, and that was the first thing. And I started reading some books and opening myself up to like out-of-body experiences. I remember it was one of the first books, a book called Psychic Explorer, and it was this guy's journeys, in the astral realm, essentially. And I'm telling my brother about this book and how this guy's having these miraculous experiences. And my brother's still kind of, brainwashed into what we were raised to believe. He's like, dude, what are you smoking? Like, and I tell him, well, here's how the guy claims you can do it. Through meditation, you can induce out-of-body experiences, or you can have a lucid dream. In the dream state, become aware and tell yourself you want to leave your body. And so he said, well, you sound crazy, but the lucid dreaming thing you're talking about, I totally know what you're talking about, because as a kid, that would happen. I would become aware in my dream. And then, so by talking about it, it triggered this starting to happen to him again. And he went from one day literally making fun of me for believing any of this, woo-woo nonsense, to the next day looking like he'd seen a ghost, saying, oh my God, last night after we talked about that, I became aware in my dream. I remembered what you said. I said, I want to leave my body. Next thing I know, I'm standing outside of my body, looking at myself there, moving my hand in front of my face, seeing trailers. Like, then I shoot through the ceiling and he was never the first guy in line for the roller coaster.
Right.
So here I am trying to make it happen. I can't. He's now, it's triggered. Even to this day, he still has experience. I'll get a call every now and then, at 3 a.m. Oh my God, I was just in some other civilization where they're all creative beings, and describing these other places, and so that was sort of the start. That, and also meeting someone with a psychic ability sort of led me to, I was like, wow, how is she doing what she's doing? I saw her do a telepathy, feat of apparent telepathy, and it was just like, and then from there, I started exploring, and as I started digesting a lot of the ideas, what I refer to as the ultimate nature of reality, take books like Conversations with God.
Sure.
It was just like, oh my gosh, how does everyone not see this? It is so.
I know that feeling. Yeah.
This is so logical, and I would talk to anyone who would, listen about it, and they're like, okay, you're either crazy or that's interesting, and go about their life. So for many years, for a very, very long time, it was just me talking about it to anyone who would listen. And I always knew, and I started having some downloads, some, sort of, my intuition got stronger. I started getting shown some things about my future and a role that I would play in helping to awaken, others. And ultimately it just sort of finally parlayed into, okay, there's this thing called podcasting. And it just it just kind of unfolded, I didn't have a aha moment. It was just like, kind of just naturally unfolded over time. And I started and I haven't looked back since. It's 2 years this month. Like really like right now. It was like, I think my first review was May 19th. And as we record, it's like May 20 something.
Yeah, man.
Right. And the first review was like an awful review. Like,
Yeah, you told me.
So
I love that though. I love
good.
that the first one was like that, and that now you're like 400 deep, and like you're obviously not a hack. I've listened to a ton in the past couple of weeks, and dude, like just how you are here, you're authentic, you're real, you're transparent, there's nothing being hidden about where you are and what you're doing. And that to me, those are the types of people who have the qualifications to kind of talk about this stuff, because there's this very interesting space we're in right now where there are people talking about the things we like to talk about, whether it's lucid dreaming or astral travel or source energy or the meaning of life in these things. I wouldn't refer to myself in any capacity as a spiritual teacher per se, but yet we can have these conversations in a way that allow people to engage with them and resonate if it works for them. And that to me is like the real service that is being provided at this point, which is qualitatively different than like going to a guru or going to this. And I'm curious, so like how has this kind of integrated or run parallel to what you do outside of the podcast and talking about this? We have lives, we have businesses, we have relationships. Like, has it seamlessly fused? Because when you were mentioning, you wanted to talk about this with everyone, I remember acutely getting some very big downloads in my early 20s, and I would talk about it to everyone, literally everyone, without any clear recognition of whether they wanted to hear it or not.
Right.
So I'm sure you're familiar with.
Right.
So how did this kind of track of awareness or consciousness kind of integrate or run along with what is going on in our day-to-day lives or your day-to-day life?
Yeah, well, it's been quite a juggling act. I definitely feel like I've bridged multiple. I've always been a serial entrepreneur. So I started, my first business at 10 years old or something, taking candy to school and selling it, and then all the other kids started copying me. And next thing you know, that was outlawed. But that was my first. Like, man, I'm making like $5 a day. I'm like the richest kid in school, and so it just continued from there. So I've always been, entrepreneurial. So that's helped in a sense that I have worked for others at times, but a lot of my adult life, I've worked for myself.
Right.
And so that me be free to go and explore it. I go to a lot of transformational festivals, for example, and sort of explore this stuff. But it's a juggling act. And at the end of the day, it's all, it's all merges. It's all one and the same.
Right.
I mean, your daily life becomes your work life flows into your personal life and vice versa.
Yes.
But what's great with this work is now my work is taking a tone of more of what I'm the most passionate about.
Right.
Although I do have some entrepreneurial ventures that I am involved with that take a lot of my time and energy. And so that, you ask a question that's it's sort of been one that's been tricky for me, because I've got a business that has just an insane amount of potential that's still relatively young. And I've had some success, as part of me playing with understanding that, I am one with the source that created all things. And, okay, let's put this to the test.
Yes.
I started a company in 2010 that started from me living on my friend's couch to growing in 2015 to, I think it was the 569th fastest growing private company in the country in Inc. magazine. Got an offer to be bought out for, tens of millions of dollars. Within 12 hours of that offer, we lost our number one revenue stream. We did vacation rentals, and it was booking.com. They severed ties with us. So I've had this roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
Okay, I can manifest anything. I'm source. I get to this place, and then it's like pulled out from under me. And but I understand that it's all part of the story, So now I have something in that same space that is growing and has even more potential than that did. But it's a juggling act. And to be quite honest with you, there are times when I have questioned myself a lot, especially in the last year. Like, Positive Head is really taking off. The podcast is just one piece of what I ultimately want to do. I have a vision for turning it into a video production and all kinds of. I have more ideas than I have time and money. That's,
yeah.
And so, am I putting my energy in the right things? You know, even though I do 5 episodes a week, I'm really only putting 7 hours ish, 8 hours maybe into the podcast. I turn the mic on and just sort of see what rants come out. And, somehow people are enjoying it, which is great. I know I enjoy it. It's a release. And yeah, and I really, by the way, I wanted to touch on what you said about being a spiritual teacher, because, I have, and I'm sure you do too, have a lot of people saying, oh my gosh, I found this podcast. It's changed my life. And I'm very careful with that whole, that's why I always say, hey, we teach best what we most need to learn. I'm here figuring this stuff out as much as I do this. I always say there's no selfless acts. I'm ultimately doing this for me.
Thank you.
I need it.
Yes.
And if you benefit, awesome. So I think it's really, really important to check one's ego and realize that we all have the same potential. And that's really the message that I'm trying to not only talk about, but demonstrate as much as I can with my own life as an example.
Dude, fuck yeah. I cannot agree with that anymore, because it's just the truth. And the truth is also, as much as we check our egos, I, at least, and many of my people I know, all of them, you can't check it all the time. So when it does pop back up and you see it, you go, oh, okay, there it is. And if you fuck up and you let your ego make a decision, you say, okay, I apologize, this is what was going on. And you'd be surprised how that's the real alchemy that can fix some things that maybe get out of whack because of egos. And I love that, like you say, we teach the things that we most need to know, because that is so fucking true. And that's exactly, I didn't know why I started this podcast when I did it, but what it's taught me are probably some of the most important lessons of my entire life. It taught me the value of being consistent. It taught me the value of being regularly creative. It taught me the value of community, listening to people, interacting. I mean, these are things that I am just still astounded with how it has changed my life outside of the podcast. And I love that you're bringing this real raw honesty about being an entrepreneur, trying to succeed in the world of business and doing things in that world, but also trying to follow your passions. And I will specifically say, for me, the past year, 2 years, I've also been dealing with these questions big time. I was not quite as young.
Seems to be a theme.
It's a big theme, because I think what we're experiencing, and we can definitely talk about this, is we're in the midst of a paradigm shift, which I know is an overused term at this point. We're in a transitional period. Things are changing. There's a new world emerging, but we are. That's why these memes and topics and tropes continue to emerge. So this theme that we're seeing, I'm seeing a lot of people like you and me, people who have an entrepreneurial spirit, people who also recognize that money isn't the thing that's going to make us happy first and foremost. However, and this is I had this written down to talk about with you because I thought it'd be a rich vein, is this interplay of money and resources and spirituality, and how money is often pinned pejoratively as the root of all evil, which I do not believe is the case.
I agree. I don't believe. I agree. It's not the root of all evil.
Right.
Clarify.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think what's happening is, when I've been connecting with a lot of people like this, we're not destitute. We're not down on our luck completely, but I have certainly hit financial tough times as I've continued to pursue my passion, of which this podcast is part of. But I see what's happening is, now the reason we are pursuing business things is, if we can change how money is used within the context of this realm, then that can actually start to change everything. So I'd be really curious to hear, your intentions and, how you relate to this stuff. And I know it's an ongoing juggling act. That's why I asked the question, because I don't have it completely figured out either.
Yeah, and I'll be very quick to say I certainly don't as well, but I have some ideas about how to navigate this realm and where we're at in our own collective evolution and our relationship to money.
Love it.
And one of the biggest downloads that I had came in 2006, and it was in regards to, me playing a role helping to ultimately use money to get rid of money. And that's, it was one of those moments like, okay, this is one of those early moments where am I really losing my mind? Like this message that was delivered to me in this very dramatic fashion. And, here's kind of what you do, Brandon. And, it ultimately helps to disrupt the monetary system. And I'm like, okay, I've definitely gone off the deep end. And then, but then I get all these affirmations afterwards. And as you start to realize that, okay, this is a holographic reality. We are the lead director, actor of our own private movie. This is your universe.
That's right.
I'm just a reflection of you in it. I am a reflection of your consciousness. You're the star. I'm the reflection. And in my movie, it goes the other way around. We all have our own private universes, essentially.
Right.
So it starts to make a lot of sense. And that goes for everyone listening. So it starts to make a lot of sense that, okay, we're all having our own private show in a sense. And there are versions of you that are very, very impactful. There's infinite timelines, right?
Yes.
And, one of the first times I had an experience of kind of grasping this idea was I went to a psychic randomly when I was like 21 years old, right around the time I started opening up to this stuff. And she said, I see you in a cold place like Chicago in business. And my jaw hit the floor because we were in Atlanta, Georgia during this little random reading. And I was planning to move to Chicago and work in business. So I was like, wow. And she goes, but there's this whole other path for you in California and music. And, lo and behold, a year later, with the help of some psilocybin mushrooms, I think I'm God and I'm going to go make music. And I end up in California. So what was she seeing? She was seeing the potential Brandons in that moment as I sat in front of her. We know time is an illusion. So it's based off of where you are. I say your life plays out at the corner of free will and destiny. It's already happened because there is no time, but yet you have free will to choose which version of you want to experience from this moment forward, always. And so that being said, and Source plays out everything you can think of and everything you cannot. It's so vast and infinite. So there's versions of there's enough room for us all to do great things and make a big difference. And just to kind of lay that groundwork, as I realized that, and then I was like, okay, I feel like I can make such a difference. And of course, it all starts with that belief. If once you kind of drum up that you're worthy and you're capable and all those things, everything starts flowing from there. And so yeah, for me, it was certainly working out my relationship with money. I've already given you an example of how I'm getting my sea legs. Like, okay, I can manifest anything. Oh, here's $30 million. Oh, psych. 12 hours later, never mind. You just lost everything. Now, back to nothing. And so as I sort of figured this out, what I think is really important for people to understand is, yes, there is a better way than the monetary system.
Right.
I think it's ultimately the evolution of the planet and what will unfold. We'll look back and say, wow, can you remember when we still had 40% of the wealth was controlled by like 6 families or whatever it is? It's insane. And we let children starve when we have plenty of resources for everyone to live abundantly.
Right.
But that being said, it's a part of the journey that Source wanted to take. Yes. You can't know that what you are unless you know that what you are not. You need the separation in order to appreciate the unity, and the abundance becomes meaningless. Love becomes meaningless if that's all there is.
So you just nailed, I don't want to cut you off, but you just nailed the function of a dualistic universe. That is the why is there evil? Why does God let children die? Why does this happen? So I just want to not totally gloss. I mean, you're fucking amazing. You just are dishing out wisdom left and right. Continue. I just wanted to point out you really nailed that.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. It's like, and a lot of people have trouble with that. Like, why this? Why that? Well, you can't, the sweet is never quite as sweet without the sour. You're an infinite being. You're an eternal being. Right. You're just a badass, brave enough soul that you have chosen to put yourself into this separation, dualistic,
that's right.
Environment. And you wanted to experience the contrast, right?
That's right.
So as we experience that contrast, and as we sort of wake up to the collective slumber, we've had enough of this separation from Source, where everyone's sleepwalkers. Where now some of us are, like the imaginal cells in the caterpillar that start coming alive to help transform it into the butterfly. We are those imaginal cells. Those of you listening are those imaginal cells. We're coming online. We're remembering, like when I started getting exposed to this stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, oh, Eureka! How does no one see this? Like, it's so in your face and logical, and I feel it in every fiber of my being.
Right.
And so as we sort of come online and understand what the heck is going on, you look at this money, this monetary system. It's currency, right? It's energy. It's meant to flow. And if you can align yourself and not view it as judge it as bad and all these things, which only disempower you, you can't be poor enough to help poor people. You can't be sad enough to help sad people. What can we do? We can work with what we've got from where we're at, right?
That's right. We're
in this system. For me, the best way I see and feel called to help change it is from within, from the inside out. I intend to, I've got a company now that has so much potential and scope, even compared to the last one, where it could literally be $1 billion company within a few years.
Right.
Okay. If I manifest that, if I step into the version of reality where the character avatar Brandon Beachum has that experience, now what can I do with that? Well, I can use it to help change things. I can use it in a way that's healing, as opposed to what a lot of the people before me have done, where they it's like, how do I preserve my wealth and control it and put it in a box and make sure no one else gets it? Meanwhile, I will use it in a way where I understand what I do with it for others is ultimately doing for myself, because there are no others.
That's right. That's right.
So,
dude, that's
my approach to money.
Well, and that's the dichotomy there. That is how, in the materialistic reductionist viewpoint, money essentially boils down to power at this point in history and for the past few thousands of years. If you control money and resources and all of that, you can then consolidate power and retain it into the future. So when concepts like nonlinearity, time as an illusion, energy wanting to flow come into play, that is at direct odds with that way of looking at the world, right? And that's what we find ourselves in too. And I like that, like, I know a lot of people who think money is bad and eschew it, and smart, brilliant people who could do, and generous people. That's the worst part. I know a lot of very generous people.
The people who need to have it to control
that's
it.
Right.
Right.
And it's very interesting. But this then goes back to the function of a dualistic universe or world, which is, if everything was stasis, level, great, awesome, or anything, we wouldn't have any knowledge that there was any other way. We wouldn't go through these lessons. So but I love that you say too, like, we're just, if you're listening to this, you're just a badass who was willing to take the leap into duality from unity. And I agree. And I think we are all badasses. However, we also jumped into a situation that, if you let it, will gladly keep you in the dark about that. I mean, there's the culture and all of these things that is clearly something that can happen. But people are getting plucked out with the aid of tools that you've spoken about, psychedelics, meditation, all of these other things that are out there. And someone gave me shit because I always go psychedelics, meditation, and then I stop. But there's far more than that. There are many other ways to reach. There's a breath work, there's nature, there's physical exercise. There's so many other things. I just always go psychedelics, meditation. Yeah. I would like to go, now that we have this jumping off point here, though. So you started exploring and investigating psychedelics in your 20s, is it early 20s? Is that right?
Yep.
So what are some of the psychedelics you have done, and what do you think their impact on your kind of life's trajectory, Brandon Beachum's life's trajectory narrative, have been?
Yeah. Well, let's see. What psychedelics have I not done? Probably an easy one to answer. I've done the majority of the major ones, mushrooms, LSD, ketamine is probably my favorite.
Really? We'll get to the others. Let's start with ketamine. Is I've inadvertently ingested ketamine at a club. I was at a club.
I've inadvertently ingested it.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard some crazy stories. I mean, I know about people who do intravenous ketamine and stuff like that, which I have not done. Wow. Yeah, and that's a whole other ballgame from what I hear. But I know that it functions quite differently than the other classic psychedelics, in the fact that it's a dissociative, and that I have also seen people I know, loved ones, under the influence of ketamine. And for an outside observer, it's very weird to look at someone, but from the experiences that are relayed after the experience, fascinating, especially in relation to time and space. So I'd love to hear some about your ketamine experiences.
Very, I think it was Terence McKenna that classified ketamine as the most, spiritually opening alongside DMT.
Wow.
So here's what my experience has been. I was introduced to it maybe 4 years ago or so. And like I said, I go to a lot of transformational festivals.
Sure.
Been to Burning Man 7 times. And, what I found that I loved about it, it's sort of like the psychedelic cocaine in a sense. Like, I'm not into, which I've tried that.
Sure.
And I'm not, it's not something I'm all about psychedelics, but also as Terrence and nothing really else, but as Terrence McKenna also said, once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Hang up the phone, right.
I can't say that I've hung up the phone after I got the message always. It started out as this like very profound experience for me, very multidimensional, very time space. Like, I can think of being in instances where the whole scene changes. I feel like I'm seeing different timelines. Like, hold on, wasn't this guy just wearing a totally different outfit and a different, some really powerful and some very powerful downloads. Same with MDMA even.
Yes,
I've had a lot of experiences with that one. It's, what I found is diminishing returns over time. I certainly feel like I've gotten most of the benefits that I can from those substances. And now I have been talking to a friend. I've done DMT just a little bit where it's a full blast off experience.
Okay.
And I have a good friend who's been doing 5-MeO DMT ceremonies. And
cool.
That is something that I'm considering exploring that's a whole nother ballgame, and I've done ayahuasca as well. Whole nother, but 5-MeO DMT, it's like, they call it the breath of God. Like you are going to merge with all that is. And it's, you have like a death experience, but it's super, super profound. And,
right.
They say it's like, you can't really put it into words. So I haven't fully went there, although that is something that I feel like there's a message for me that I can still get. And an experience that I can have that, I would just say with these substances, me being sort of a very playful, youthful kind of kid in the cookie jar person, it's like I've played with them quite a bit and I found diminishing returns from them. So I think it's important to be aware of that. And anything can be, water is the best thing for you possible, can also kill you, right? Absolutely. So it's like all things. It can be so beneficial and helpful, but then if you fixate on it and it becomes, luckily for me, I've never been someone who has addictive personality.
Right.
People think, so that's really helped. But I think exploring with him. I mean, hey, I have a son, a teenage son. I encourage him to explore. Now he's not. What's interesting by that is he's a lot less interested than I am, and he has a very little.
Isn't that always funny? Yeah.
I don't force it, but it's a great example of, hey, when you don't try and suppress things, how they end up not wanting to do it that much anyway. They always go. It's like my son going against dad is like he's like the adult and I'm like the kid. It's funny, but so I encourage people, especially those who are sort of just new to a lot of this information and are just sort of figuring it out. You can, you can take mushroom. So many people with mushrooms has been a profound, life-changing. You do Absolutely. It one time, and there's a shift that happens. LSD as well. I mean, where just a shift happens, and you no longer see things the same way because you've actually felt them from a different perspective. You blasted open your third eye.
That's
and
right.
You've experienced the multidimensional nature of reality, and you perceive things from it's kind of like once you've seen behind the curtain, you don't fully go back.
Yeah, I mean, and that has been the function of many psychedelics. I actually don't use a tremendous amount of psychedelics at this point in my life. I have been microdosing with LSD.
That's something I've considered. How has that been for you?
Let me tell you my experiences with microdosing. So I've microdosed psilocybin and I've microdosed LSD. Mushrooms, there is a come up, and it's much like mushrooms where you are ingesting a substance that has its own consciousness and will sometimes exert that influence. So you can't really, like, I remember doing it and I was working and I was on a meeting and I realized very quickly into the meeting that this was not the right decision to have made, like to take a work call and do it. That said, LSD, I do 10 micrograms every fourth day. I'm on a regimen. has been one of the most
How do you
transformative.
measure it out? Exactly?
Great question.
I wondered about that.
Wonderful question. So I have liquid, or I had liquid, and for any police or narcotics officers listening, this is all just speculation and informational, not based in reality at all. Of course.
Of course.
But what I did is I had 1,000 micrograms of LSD, and you'll mix that with 100 grams of water. So 1 milliliter equals 1 gram. I didn't know that. I found this out. Science, everyone. So when you mix 1,000 micrograms with 100 grams of water, what happens is 1 milliliter becomes 10 micrograms. So I have a calibrated dropper and 1 milliliter of water now. You just shake it up, and you don't even have to shake it up. It just, the way LSD works is it just goes into the water. So I do it every fourth day. It's been one of the most profound experiences of my entire life. I mean, it's truthfully, I use an example, and I'm thinking about writing about it once I'm done with the full regimen, the 3-month thing. But I liken it to with meditation, and I'm not the best meditator, and I've actually dropped off doing it for the past month and a half, but I have done it regularly. And I noticed it got me to the space where one of my biggest issues, everyone who listens to this knows this, I have anger issues, I have impatience issues, is meditation got me to the space where before I was about to get angry, I would notice I was about to get angry, but I would still get angry. And I couldn't widen that gap enough to stop myself. The first day of microdosing LSD, I not only recognized the space, but backed off. And that to me was the most profound thing. On top of that, being able to slip into what I refer to as gratitude feedback loops, which are these just like ecstatic experiences of gratitude that will last for like minutes or even hours at a time if you're really lucky.
Wow.
That's very possible. Going out in nature, experiencing like the awe of nature and unity of everything, that was easy. Creatively, both writing, making music, business ideas, what I would refer to is slipping into a flow state about as easily as one could slip into a flow state. Truthfully, I was skeptical because I spoke to Dennis McKenna about this years ago. I'm sure he's changed his mind, but he was basically of the opinion that it was such a small amount that it wouldn't do anything. But the new studies that are coming out about how LSD actually interacts with your brain basically says that serotonin binds around it and essentially forms a lid over it. And what happens is the lid will not prevent the LSD to leave, which is why such small amounts continue to have such long-lasting effects. What eventually happens is over like a 24-hour period, that lid gets jostled, and then it pops out, and then it's gone, which is why it's not in your system for very long. I would basically say for anyone who has done LSD, it's like taking the epiphany and flow state and amazing moments at the peak experience, but drawing them out over a much longer period of time, not necessarily lessening their impact, but lengthening the time that you have to kind of mentally and psychologically approach some of those things, which to me was always the most frustrating part of LSD, is when you'd have the cascade of epiphanies and you're like, that one, oh my God, that one, and you just couldn't really, and you're just blowing out. You're like, oh my God, I can't catch all these things. It seems that you have a lot more time to process them. I highly recommend it. I mean, if you're saying the diminishing returns, I think that this is probably a very good antidote for that, because there is a method where you take it, you do a results day the next day to see residual effects, then you do an off day, and then you take it again. So like there's a period where it's really not in your system, but yet the effects can remain because it's actually like functioning in with like your neurochemistry and your psychology. It's quite amazing. But I also hear about what you're saying about, when you get the message, hang up the phone. I think there's messages for all of these things.
A different way. That's a different approach, though, what you're talking about.
It's very different.
I mean, it's like almost like a different thing. Yeah.
It is a completely qualitatively a different thing. It also, as I can see the trajectory of microdosing as it gets, starting to go into clinical studies of it, this is not people taking drugs to get fucked up. We can all, and I don't think psychedelics is either. Just to be clear, I've never done a psychedelic. I know people do recreationally. I have an intention to learn or experience something that I think is going to help me or other people, right? But from an outsider looking in, Mr. Jeff Sessions looking in, that's people getting whacked out of their fucking mind. Like, give anyone ketamine, even if that changes. Let's say there's a terminal person who is going to die, and you give them ketamine or mushrooms or LSD, and they come out of that experience not being afraid of dying. All Jeff Sessions or someone like that sees is this person being fucked up for a few hours. That's a bad thing. So I think microdosing really is the foot in the door to kind of change the narrative of why we would be using these things. And I could not recommend it more. It's truthfully.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been giving it some consideration. So that I find that very, very interesting. And by the way, that's the only sort of feedback I've ever heard from anyone. It seems.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And to speak on what you were just saying, just a little bit more. I mean, I'll take a friend, for example, who long time, one of my best friends since childhood, and certainly had the ups and downs in life, a lot of sort of manic depressive behavior.
Sure.
And I gave him his first ketamine experience a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
I just talked to him the other day. Goes, Brandon, I still can't stress to you what I experienced and how much it changed my life for the better.
Right.
Like he's like, I'm not the same person anymore. What I saw and what I experienced. Now, with me, I shared the experience with him that time. I found not only diminishing returns, and I don't have those sorts of experiences, it seems, anymore like I once did.
Well,
right. So it's almost like I have a much higher tolerance with that particular substance where, he's there having this life-changing experience. I'm like, I can do it and you maybe wouldn't even know. Right? Whereas someone else, you're going to know he was on it. I mean, it was pretty funny he's a very dramatic person anyway. So it was entertaining from where I sat.
Yeah. And I mean,
but
what you're getting at also is this idea that, I told this story on your podcast, but when Ram Dass famously gave his guru, 900 micrograms of the most powerful LSD ever made, he didn't have any effects. And it wasn't because it was bunk LSD. It was because that's not going to change his neurochemistry. That's not going to change his psychological, mystical outlook. He's already there. So that is also potentially another, maybe not physiologically based diminishing returns, but you're there, man. Like I hear people, because I haven't done ayahuasca and I haven't done DMT, but I'll talk to a lot of people who have done ayahuasca, like done it a lot of times, like hundreds of times. And they'll be like, A, you'll know when you want to do it or if you're called to do it. And B, they're like, you don't seem like you really have to do it right now. Like you seem like you have some perspectives that a lot of people need to go get there. And it's the same kind of guru relationship with a lot of people say like, to physically meet a being who is doing magical, miraculous things in front of your face, not everyone needs that to cultivate the faith that exists. Some people need that because there's no other thing that is going to convince them of anything else other than seeing some crazy shit with their own eyes. So that's why we have this spectrum of places where people can engage with this stuff. And I think that's a function of it rather than kind of like a defect, if you will, Right. Let me ask you this. I have all these things and I realize I'm not going to be able to get all to them. We'll have to do this again too. Maybe after you do your 5-MeO DMT experience and you die, we can come back and have one about that because that sounds fucking fascinating.
I will add one thing to that real quick before your question. So my friend who's been talking to me about, he's done maybe 25 ceremonies, and he's saying what he feels like, sort of like the Ram Dass story. He's like, I feel like my life is becoming more integrated as always a DMT sort of experience. And for that matter, there's some that theorize that, hey, this is just one great DMT trip. It's in everything. It's like we're finding that it's, it's the one thing that passes the blood-brain barrier. And, so well, it's an interesting perspective.
Well, let's actually talk a little bit about that. I mean, this is also in the concept that time is an illusion, world is Maya or samsara, or that we're in a dream-like illusory experience, which I have not done 5-MeO DMT, have not done DMT. I can confirm that it feels like in the past 10 to 15 years, the world is much more dreamlike in terms of how it functions. I was talking about this, I don't remember exactly with who, but the distance between thought and manifestation now seems as small as it's ever been, not just for me personally or the people I know, but everything. So I think we are kind of, whether it's a hologram, whether this is an experiment, yeah, it is. So it's a very interesting time we're in where we're starting to see some of these liminal boundaries between like the real and the magical dissolve more and more. And this gets back to how do we function in this reality? Where does our intention line up to this? But my question to you was going to be this is, as you were beginning to explore the psychic, the lucid dreams, the astral, the mystic, were there any books or people or thinkers or philosophies that really played a big influence in what you were learning? Like I'm always curious to hear like kind of who were people reading or looking up to or listening to.
Right. Some of the biggest ones are the ones that had the most effect on me. Conversations with God. I always recommend that trilogy to people, or actually I think it's even more than a trilogy now. But those books were very profound, and I feel like they're explained in such a eloquent way where it just breaks down all of the questions, all the big questions about who we are, why we're here, what we're doing. Power of Now, that's a big one for dissolving ego, because EGO, everybody's greatest obstacle, or edging God out. That's something that I think all of us have to deal with as we sort of come online and remember our divinity, that we have to sort of deal with that spiritual narcissism piece, as I referenced a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how do I deal with that and get my, humility, is a key word. And in a lot of people, I think early on you can turn into this sort of, oh, well, you don't know yet. I liken
it to when I was vegan for 2 years. I was the worst fucking vegan ever. I was like just lording it over people.
Viral video that's going around now. No. The guys just go up to random people. They're like, hey, I'm wondering, can you tell me directions to this place? By the way, I'm vegan. I just want you. Or he goes up to they just go up to random people, and it's just to announce that they're vegan. It's like
that's basically. I was basically doing that, but I mean that is the same kind of principle. You think you've gained some ethical high ground or moral or spiritual high ground, and then you're up there, and you're like, if only these poor plebes knew what I know about the world, and I get that's what I know. I get it.
And when you realize it's all a reflection of you.
That's right.
So anything that you see that you're looking down on is looking down on some part of self.
Yes.
Like you are a vast being, and you have plenty. If self-growth is something that you've decided a path you want to go down, which is not a requirement, by the way.
Right.
But if you decide that you want to go down, you've got plenty of it to do. So you might as well not get too full of yourself.
Probably not the worst advice. Let's just say that, because it's Oh, amazing. So
and that's why the whole spiritual teacher thing and guru thing, it's like, as I already know that my reach will continue to expand, and I feel very called to help sort of be a bridge, especially for those who are new to this sort of thinking and putting it in terms that makes them feel comfortable. And I already know it's happening. It's happening for you. It's happening for me on a small scale. I know that's going to expand. And how, I feel like the more I grow, the more the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
And humility needs to be just like more and more a key piece to really even have those next level experiences. Like it's everything.
It really is. And I mean, if you don't have it, the pitfalls and traps that, whether they're internal or culturally, they're just grow and grow and grow. Because like you said, there's a way to be aware that you're doing what you're supposed to and seeing results that confirm and affirm that. But if you're not every step of the way being like, well, what am I doing with this information? I have this happen all the time. Like when I get a really good podcast downloads number, I'm like, oh man, this is so great. It's really happening. And I had to G-check myself. I'd be like, listen, what if these weren't high? Would it be any less of a good pod? You know what I mean? Like there's this whole thing you have to play, and we all are plugged into this social media world where people see their likes grow. I luckily have been somewhat buffered from the vanity metrics and all this stuff because like I've been a digital marketer for long enough to know what actually matters. But I mean, there are a lot of trappings with this stuff, and I love that you brought it back to the spiritual teacher stuff. So we're running out of time. I have 3 questions I ask at the end and then one larger question. But before I get to those, man, this has been so effortless and awesome and easy. I would love to do more of these. We've known each other for such a short period of time, but just from that first conversation, it became very clear the resonance that was there, man. It's just, I'm super grateful and happy to have met and know you now, man. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you. You know, it's so amazing. That's one of the things that happens. It has happened for me, and I'm sure you'll agree, as I sort of continue to do the self work and focus on being the next greatest and greatest version of myself, more and more clear reflections, close reflections show up.
Yeah.
And it's awesome and it's beautiful. And you see, like, I mean, your show's called Synchronicity. Well, since day one, the one question that I ask is a story of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story. I mean, everyone who listens to my show knows he's going to ask his guests about synchronicity. So it's, there's just synchronicity in the fact that your show is called Synchronicity. So yes, I would say I describe it as source. A good way to think of it is it's like a tree, right? And we're all one. It's all the same stuff, ultimately. Everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. It's all reflections. But that being said, where there's also branches on that tree, and there's leaves on a particular branch that are right next to each other, that sort of split off from source at the same spot, right? Yeah. It's kind of the idea of, even you hear in romantic terms, twin flames or soulmates.
Right.
This idea of they split off and it's the same soul in different bodies. And it's really just degrees of separation, because in the end, it's all one. But, there's those beings that are, I believe, I had Eben Alexander on the show, one of my favorite interviews. And he, for those of you who don't know, he was Harvard neurosurgeon who went into a coma. His brain was destroyed. They said, pull the plug. He's done. His brain's fried. He miraculously comes out and has this whole wild story of his experience on the other side. And one of the things he talked about is when we sign up for the game that is physicality, we reincarnate in soul groups and soul families and go through it together. And we show up in each other's lives time and time again as different characters in different roles to spur one another on to give the experiences that we seek.
That's right.
And so I would definitely say that you are soul family, and reconnecting with you is like reconnecting with an old friend for a reason.
It really is, and it's fucking awesome, and I love the way you put that, man. That's exactly how I feel and intuitively know to be the case. So let me get to these last questions. We'll do this again. Also, just for people listening, I'll have an announcement. Brandon is taking his Positive Head Mind Pod. I just Freudian slipped it. Positive Head is joining MindPod Network, so you can catch him there, and I'll have links to everything he does in the episode pages for this. But yeah, definitely a cool dude. So
and thank you so much for including me in your wonderful, wonderful little family there.
Yeah, man, that's our little soul pod.
Very, very exciting.
Our MindPod soul pod.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's your other synchronicity. Positive Head, MindPod, potato.
We got it all there, man. So what is 3 questions? What's your favorite color?
I would always say red as a kid, but I feel like it changes now all the time.
Totally.
Like sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green. You're seeing like this color behind you on the wall. It's because we're looking at each other on video right now. Sort of like a aquamarine blue-green thing.
That's my favorite color. So
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is sort of today my favorite color, but it's changed. It's changed at times. So.
I totally get it, man. And that will apply for these next 2 that's totally okay. What's your favorite number?
My favorite number is 37. And I, for some reason, would talk about 37 all the time as a kid. Me and my friend that I referenced earlier, Paul, with the ketamine experience. We were the most obnoxious teenagers, and we would always the answer to things just for some reason became, someone would ask and we'd be like, answer it in the most annoying way. 37. And that was just like our thing. And we would just say 37 to like everything. Well, now I meet and forthcoming on one of my episodes. I actually did my first live stream with an interview a few days ago.
Oh, nice.
With Christopher David Jackson, who's an amazing individual. He's promoter, philosopher, and has a company called Grateful Generation, is about to throw his first transformational festival called One Love.
Awesome.
And talking to him, and he started talking about all the 37 synchronicity in his life.
Boy.
Christ consciousness and
the
stuff to do with Christ consciousness. And so I'm like, oh, wow. How, and him and I, same thing with like you. It's like, oh my gosh, like this is someone I know at such a deep level.
Yeah.
And I know will continue to work with in this life. And I've just met him literally like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, man.
And but we talk about number 37 in that episode and his experience with it and how it's somehow been randomly meaningful to me. With him, it has a lot more.
I can't wait to hear that, man. Well, 3 and 7, very mystical numbers. All right. Well, what's your
one? And
yeah, exactly. You know, we're doing it in our heads, of course. So, what is your favorite animal?
Ooh, my favorite animal. Well, I'm a Leo, so I feel very drawn to lions. I had someone on my show who I've had several psychic mediums on the last year, and I forget which one of them was like, "Oh my gosh, your spirit guides are here, Brandon," and one of them's jumping up and down saying "lion, lion, lion." I feel like maybe Richard Lionheart, who I didn't know who that was at the time, and you're very close to the soul, and then I end up finding later that I have I'm reading about Charles the Conqueror, William the Conqueror,
right,
and find out that my relative was like his right-hand man. And in the article, they link him to Richard Lionheart. So I'm like, hold on. Now I heard from this person about, Richard Lionheart. Now I'm seeing a physical connection in my family lineage to this character.
Shit.
Way. So yeah. So I would say the lion.
Iron like a lion in Zion, my friend. That's awesome. All right. Last question. What's a practical tip that you could share with people listening that's helped you in your life?
A practical tip. That's such a great question. Okay. The practical tip is, this is all a story. And if you can approach your life from that, lest you become like a child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven, right? Jesus quoted as saying, what did he mean by that? Become childlike. Bring that your child self exists. It actually exists your 5th birthday party is happening on another channel right now. Right. You're just not tuned into that. You exist, that child self. And for many of us, it's been squashed by the letdowns, the cultural conditioning. And, I feel like I've been lucky in the sense that I've kept my childlike state, and as a result, my life is magical, and I have all kinds of adventures and all the things that a child would. So if you can bring that energy, make that a focus. Today, I'm going to make it play. I'm going to make it fun. And by the way, life is rendering. It's not happening to me. It's happening through me. And it's also not happening to you, it's happening for you. So if it's happening through me, if I wake up every morning and say, today I'm going to play and be as childlike as I can, even if I have drudgery ahead of me, all kinds of work and bills and whatever, I'm going to bring a playful nature and energy to it. If you can do that, and tell stories when something happens to you that's quote unquote negative, what's really happening is there's always a diamond in disguise, right? What it is that you seek is hiding behind the trial or the tribulation. So if you can become childlike, I'm really giving 2 tips. Bring that childlike energy to everything that you do. And you can also understand that stories, whatever's happening, has no meaning except for the meaning you give it. You are the lead director, creator, writer, actor, actress in your own movie. So take that trial, that tribulation, and write it in a way, tell a different story. Right. This is happening through me and for me because and make up grandiose stories of what it will parlay into that will be even better because of that. And we can look at that oftentimes where, man, when this bad thing happened to me, I had no idea it would lead to this thing. But bring that to the moment, and you actually create that energy to come in. You co-create the experience of it being a story that with a good outcome like you want to see. Okay. Well, I didn't know it's a lump of coal. Yeah, I didn't know you were going to bring you brought the alchemical blueprint for having a life of fulfillment. Dude, amazing. Fucking amazing. You're so awesome. We're going to do this again. I'm super happy to have gotten to know you. Like I said, I can sense that many cool crossovers and things will be happening in our collective future, dude. Thank you so much. It already happened. Already happened. Exactly. Love you. Dude, thank you so much. Much love, my friend. No, thank you so much. I look forward to exploring, adventuring, and making magic with you.
I hope you liked that episode. I sure did. Brandon, a reminder, you can go check him out on mindpodnetwork.com, on his website, positivehead.com. He runs a daily podcast, so there will be no shortage of Brandon if you're into what he's doing. If you're looking for a place to start and you haven't heard the show, how about you check out the episode I was on? I don't know. I actually really had a great time on his show. Really a hell of a dude. So happy he came on. Brandon, you rule. If you listen past the music, you're the coolest. A reminder, you can get the music you hear on the show. It's all mine. Patreon.com/synchronicity. You can also donate without Patreon. Whatever you want to do. Totally cool. Awesome that you do. Thank you to the ratings and reviews. We just hit 100. Didn't want to brag in the intro there, but we hit 100 reviews, 100 ratings. That's super cool. What else I got going on? Not too much. That's it. You rule. I will see you next week.